guys, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing? I hope you are doing great. So I bring this gist for you guys. Let's dive into it together.
Do people want from trans men? You don't want us to use the men's bathroom, but you also don't want us to use the women's bathroom. You don't want us to participate in women's sports because we have too much power, but you also don't want us to participate in men's sports because if we lose, we were genetically predisposed to that, and if we win, it's because we're pumped full of steroids. What the fuck? Like, how the fuck are we supposed to live our lives as, like, human beings?
How does transphobia affect trans men specifically? Let's get into it. I'm a trans man. We're going to do this in one take. So the anti-trans rhetoric to trans men is different than trans women, right? Trans men experience the victim rhetoric that, we were confused little girls, someone hurt us, and now we're men. But because of this rhetoric, it leads to us being infantilized and not taken seriously in society. And then that infantilization leads to our silence, right? A lot of trans women get shit like, oh, trans men aren't speaking up. Why can't you just be silent? And honey, the trans men are speaking. You're just choosing not to listen to us because of your infantilization of us. And the other thing is, once we transition to men, people are like, oh, you don't need resources anymore because you're a man. And yes, trans men experience male privilege, but only on the condition that we don't disclose our trans identities. And
shit like this is how I know that cis feminists don't actually give a shit about trans people and just want to center themselves as being the most oppressed group of all time. You're right, trans men are men. Do they experience the same privileges that cis men have? No. Trans men are as much of a marginalized gender as cis women, if not more of a marginalized gender. Trans men experience extremely high rates of sexual assault and violence, unlike cis men. Trans men are often denied medical care, housing, jobs for their gender, unlike cis men. And even if a trans man does pass and gets the privileges of passing as a cis man, one, a lot of them are often read as gay because of feminine behaviors or a higher pitched voice, so they're subject to homophobic violence. Or if they're found out to be trans, they lose all of the privilege that they had from passing. It's okay to say that trans men are different from cis men because they're treated differently. And seeing the trans men in the comments saying, yeah, I hate men and I hate myself, makes me really fucking sad. Rhetoric like this keeps trans masks in the closet because we're terrified of being the oppressor.
I agree with this video, and I want to add something. Transphobia against trans men is rooted in misogyny. What I mean is, when transphobic people think about and look at and talk to trans masculine or trans men, they are thinking, hey, you're a woman. You are a woman who's driven by emotions. You're a woman who can't make logical decisions. You're a woman who, first and foremost, should be able to have kids. And your bodily autonomy, I don't respect. And if you want proof that the root of transphobia against trans men and trans masculine people is misogyny, all you have to do is look at literally any politician talking about trans kids. If they're not talking about bills banning trans athletes, which is targeting trans girls, they're talking about trans boys. They don't want trans boys to have top surgery because then they won't be able to breastfeed. They don't want trans boys to go on puberty blockers and HRT because then they might not be able to get pregnant. It is rooted in, this is a girl, not a boy. We do not respect your gender. You must be able to have kids. We don't respect your bodily autonomy. You must have kids in the future. And when we understand the reality that the root of transphobia against trans men and trans masculine people is misogyny, the reality we experience elevated levels of sexual violence makes more sense. Every trans masculine person I've talked to who is a survivor of sexual violence that happened after they transitioned has told me, it was implied or explicitly told to them, that they experienced that violence because they were being reminded they are women. And this is important, not just on a semantic level, but on a reality of day-to-day life for trans masculine people. Trans masculine people experience more sexual violence and have less access to reproductive health care that is gender affirming, and have less access because of the overturning of Roe to reproductive health care if they experience sexual violence or get pregnant and they don't want to. And these are things cis men literally never have to think about. So while we might have fleeting moments of passing privileges in short interactions, as long as we are not out, ultimately we still experience gender.
This whole thing has illustrated two things for me very clearly. The first, these people do not know what a trans man is. Trans men are so invisible to them, so counterintuitive to their narrative, that they don't realize that when they advocate for trans people using the restroom of the sex they were assigned at birth, this is the dude who's gonna show up in the women's room. This is what you want walking into the women's room with your daughter. 2, it's not about assigned birth sex. They want to push us out of public spaces. They want to keep us on a pee-pee leash to our homes. Because this guy would not be able to legally use the public restroom anymore. I'd get my ass beat in the women's room, and y'all don't want me using the men's.
Hi, I'm a trans masked person on the more androgynous side currently, but you wait, I'll have a full beard at some point. I am a person that's from the UK, the shithole that it is right now. That's right, Turf Island. Oh, what a hellscape it is. So our Conservative government, the Tories, yeah, the fuckwits that won't pay nurses a living wage, that won't pay carers a living wage, that won't pay to keep up with inflation, and people can't afford to heat their homes. They currently want to rewrite the Equality Act to change sex to refer to biological sex, which would mean it would keep trans people out of single-sex spaces or potentially ban them. And it would also potentially give people grounds to just flat-out discriminate against trans people on the grounds of them being trans. And if this wasn't going to make people's lives, like, incredibly difficult, I'd find it so comical that they just do not want to acknowledge that trans men exist. Because this is how you get men in women's spaces.
See, when you start getting this rigid in your definitions of what a man is, what a woman is, what a lesbian is, you start to kick people out of your community who you didn't intend to. Because you have made multiple comments now telling me that I'm straight. I at no point have indicated that I identify as a man. I'm a non-binary lesbian, and you are now telling me I'm not allowed to identify as a lesbian because of the assumptions you're making about me, my experiences, and how I consider gender. Trans men who identify as heterosexual men are heterosexual men. Some trans men out there have had a bunch of experiences with lesbianism, really identify with lesbianism, and have a much more complex with their relationship as men than other people do. So they still really identify with lesbianism. I don't have a problem with that. It is not my business to go around telling somebody what invalidates their gender or sexuality. And regardless, trans men are in community with me. I'm a butch. Trans men are in community with me, and I will always be in community with them. If they want to identify as a lesbian, I will not stop them, ever.
Genuine question, do you know what a trans man is? Do you know that people who are born a female can be trans? Because those are what those terms are used for. They're not used for cisgender women who are mothers. They are used for trans men who give birth. They're used for surrogates who don't want to be called mother. It's so frustrating to see cis women attack trans women and be like, we need no prefix, when their womanhood is so fragile, they can't accept that there are different women from them. Because guess what? We already put terms in front of women to talk about different experiences. You, as a white woman, have a different lived experience from a black woman. Guess what? You're both still women. And you realize it would be fucked up to be like, I'm a woman and she's a black woman, right? There are different ways of being a woman. The word queer means strange, weird, odd, deviant, all those things. And that is what being a part of the queer community is. It is embracing being odd, being strange, being deviant. It is taking those things that have been thrown at us and going, fuck you, we are. There are always going to be people who identify in a way that you don't understand. And I would much prefer to be in a community with trans men who are lesbians than with people who police their identity.
Hey Max, my name is Austin. I am that 40-year-old detransitioner that you say you'll never be. And I want to say that I also thought when I was your age that I would never ever detransition either, that I 100% knew who I was then, there, and I would always be unfalteringly unchangeable. You know, I really believed that. I transitioned really young too, but obviously in a much different time, in a much different socioeconomic bracket than what I kind of perceive you to have grown up in. And that's no shade, that's just the real tea. But I think it's really dangerous for you to come on TikTok and say that people shouldn't listen to the detrans movement just because you may or may not disagree with some of our politics or may not ever see yourself detransitioning. I saw you kind of backpedal a little in your response stitch to Lucy, and it just has me a little bit confused because truthfully, if gender is a spectrum, why do we have to try to change anything? Why can't you just be you? You know, why are you pushing so hard? Not you specifically, but why is like big trans pushing so hard to make sure that children are medicalized? Like, you have no idea what 20 plus years of HRT will do to your bladder or your endocrine system or your urethra. I do. It's not what you think. It has irreversible side effects and damages. Puberty blockers are not reversible. They're absolutely not reversible. I know that's the big narrative that they are, but everyone I've ever talked to that's on it, your puberty never comes back correctly. You're always stunted. It's not like we're some, you know, cabal of detrans people that want to hurt trans people. No, I still feel like I will always be a trans person. So no one is going to take that right from me to speak of that, you know, to speak to my truth and just share like what 20 plus years of trans identity can do to a person. You know, it's not all perfect. It's not all easy peasy. Life gets harder and harder and harder. Now, I think that when you're female to male, maybe your experience will be different from a male to female. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I come from a time when there was so much more internalized and externalized homophobia out in the world, but that's not the case anymore. America has accepted gay people and lesbian people and trans people, and right-wing people don't want to, you know, kill you or cause a genocide. Like, that's absolutely not true. What we want is to make sure that children are old enough to make informed consent. And you can't do informed consent if you are unable to be informed about lifetime effects. So God love you. And
I want to make something very clear. The trans community and the gay community should be completely separate, because I'm gay and I don't want to put on a dress. I don't want to change my body parts. I've never had the desire to put on heels or a wig, perform in front of kids, perform in front of adults with cocktails at night. I'm not that person, okay? I'm just a gay guy that is happy that we got through the AIDS epidemic and we succeeded that. And then gay marriage was legalized. Great, huge accomplishments for the gay community. Why can't the gay community just go back now, live their lives? They got their accomplishments, they got everything that they wanted. They're accepted, they're equal to everybody else, but no. Now men, no matter who they are, can put a dress on, say they're trans, even if they haven't changed their body parts. You know, there's stuff down there. They can be a total dude and go into a woman's bathroom, a woman's locker room, a woman's dorm room, and say they're a woman and show their junk to any woman that's trying to have her personal space. No, the trans and the gay community.
Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notification. Anytime I upload a video, you will be notified. Stay blessed and bye.